Unit 3, Heckscher-Ohlin Model and Other Trade Theories. This unit covers Chapter 5 of your e-text. This unit answers, what is Heckscher-Ohlin theory? How it determines prices of different factors of production? How well does it fits to world trade? What are empirical evidences to Heckscher-Ohlin? Does Heckscher-Ohlin explains actual trade patterns? Does it identify the factors that gain or lose from trade? The Heckscher-Ohlin (HO) theory states that a nation will export the commodity whose production requires the intensive use of the nation's relatively abundant, and therefore, cheap, factor and import the commodity whose production requires the intensive use of the nation's relatively scarce, and therefore, expensive, factor. In other words, relative factor abundance drives comparative advantage and the pattern of trade. A country is said to be relatively labor abundant if it has a higher ratio of labor to other factors than does the rest of the world. A product is said to be relatively labor intensive if labor costs are a greater share of its value than they are of the value of other products. The HO explanation starts with why product prices might differ in countries before they open to trade. Heckscher and Ohlin predicted that the key to comparative cost lies in factor proportions used in production. Refer to the same example we discussed in the last chapters, where United States and rest of the world were involved in trade of cloth and wheat. If cloth costs 2 wheat/cloth in United States and less than 1 wheat/cloth in the rest of the world, it must be because United States has more of the factors that wheat production uses and less of the factors that cloth production uses. This means that in United States land is abundant and labor is scarce. Let us now see how factor availability decides its income. The HO theory assumes that there are only two factors of production, land and labor, which can freely move within a country. The income for landlords is the rent on their land and the income of workers is their wage rate. With no trade, land being abundant should rent more cheaply in United States, which will make US a lower cost producer of wheat. Conversely, scarcity of labor should make the wage rate higher in US, making cloth relatively expensive to produce. This is why product prices differ before trade. And this is also the reason why US export wheat and import cloth once trade begins. The implications of HO trade for factor incomes follow from the pressures for changes in production levels as a country shifts from no trade to free trade. The export-oriented sector tries to expand production, as the relative price of the exportable good increases. The import-competing sector shrinks its production, as the relative price of the importable good decreases. The changes in production affects trade in short run where production factors cannot move easily between sectors, and in long run where factors can easily move between sectors. In the short run, production factors cannot move easily between sectors. Therefore, in the short run, many or all factors employed in the export industry benefit from strong demand for their services and gain income. In the short run, many or all factors employed in the import competing industry suffer from reduced demand for their services and lose income. For example, in the United States, owners of land and labor in the wheat sector are expected to gain, and owners of land and labor in the cloth sector are expected to lose. In the long run, the period of time that is emphasized by the Heckscher-Ohlin approach, factors can easily move between sectors. The implications for factor incomes then depend on the factors demanded by the expanding sector relative to the factors released by the contracting industry. According to the HO theory, the expanding sector is intensive in the country's abundant factor, while the shrinking sector is intensive in the country's scarce factor. In the shift to free trade, there is strong demand for the abundant factor, and there is weak demand for the scarce factor. Thus for US in our example, the shift to free trade increases the price and income of the abundant factor, that is, land and landlords, and it decreases the price and income of the scarce factor, that is, workers and their wage rate. This table shows how free trade affects income in the long run. The first row of the matrix describes initial product prices in both the United States and the rest of the world before trade. Initially, wheat is cheap and cloth is expensive in the United States. Wheat is expensive and cloth is cheap in the rest of the world. Row 2 diagrams the opening of trade. The United States sells wheat to, and purchases cloth from, the rest of the world. The rest of the world sells cloth to, and purchases wheat from, the United States. Row 3 describes the subsequent changes in product prices in both countries after the opening of trade. In the United States, the price of wheat rises and the price of cloth falls. In the rest of the world, the price of wheat falls and the price of cloth rises. Row 4 describes the change in production as producers respond to changes in factor prices. In response to product price changes, the United States produces more wheat and less cloth. The rest of the world produces less wheat and more cloth. Row 5 describes national factor markets changing as a crucial step. In the United States, for each unit of cloth sacrificed, many workers and a small amount of land is laid off, as extra wheat demands few workers and much land. In the rest of the world, for each unit of wheat sacrificed, much land and few workers are laid off, as extra cloth demands many workers and little land. Row 6 describes the response of national factor prices to the changes in the national factor markets. In the United States, wage rates fall and rents rise in both sectors. In the rest of the world, wage rates rise and rents fall in both sectors. Row 7 describes the long-run results. In the long run, product prices equalize between countries. There are net gains for both countries, but different effects on different groups. The winners are United States landowners and foreign workers. The losers are United States workers and foreign landowners. This table shows the effects of trade on various factor prices and income in short run and long run. It shows the winners and losers in the short and long runs, which look somewhat different than those in long run because more adjustment can occur in the long time period. In the short run, we can see in the table that in U.S., wheat landowners and laborers gain, whereas for rest of the world, cloth-producing landowners and laborers will gain. But in long run, in U.S. abundant factor, i.e. land and landowners are gaining, also for rest of the world, abundant factor, that is laborers are gaining.